On this episode of Rock Down South, we sit down with Tristan Tritt. We have a fun time on this episode, so you definitely don't want to miss this one. We hope you'll enjoy. Let's go.
Hey, this is Tristan Tritt, and you're listening to Rock Down South.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Rock Down South, your home for rock and country music. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Tristan Tritt. And Tristan is a fantastic up-and-coming rock artist with a really cool modern and alternative sound. We talk all about what it was like growing up in Georgia, having a famous country superstar as a father, and his new single, Nervous System Overload. We also talk about his decision to pursue rock music as opposed to country music, as most people might expect. I think you guys will enjoy this conversation, so without further ado, here's the show. We got Tristan Tritt of the house. How you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for getting on here today. Really excited to talk to you. We're going to talk rock and roll and the new music and all things like that, man. But thanks so much for jumping on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get into it. And so I know your dad is originally from my neck of the woods here in Marietta, right outside of Atlanta. But where did you grow up in?
So I grew up in a place called Hiram, Georgia, which is not too far from Marietta at all, like 20, 30 minutes. And I went to school for a long time out in Cobb County. So it's been very, very close to me. And I've always been around Marietta and been to, the place he grew up many times where my grandma still lives. So it's super cool seeing, the change that this area outside of Atlanta has experienced in the last 20 years, because the place I'm in is just blown up.
Oh, absolutely. And we're talking in local hometowns right at this point, because I live in Cobb County as well. So other people might not be familiar, but, I moved out here probably 5 years ago, and, it's been on the up and up, one of the reasons why I moved out here. So.
Oh, absolutely.
That's awesome. You're from locally around the corner originally. Did you do any time in Nashville, or did your dad live here for most of the part, or did he live in Nashville?
Surprisingly, he never lived in Nashville. He was always based out of Georgia. He would go up there and do what he had to do. And I'm kind of on a similar schedule with Nashville, where I go back and forth. And all my band members are based out of there. And, I do my writings and meetings and everything out there. But it's about a 3.5-hour drive, and I still get to do what I need to do and still have that hometown vibe by coming back to Georgia. So I prefer getting away from the city when I need to, and then being there when it's, absolutely necessary. But to be honest with you, I'm not a city person. I've tried, and it's not for me.
I completely understand. Well, we absolutely love that you're from Georgia, specifically from Cobb County. It's awesome having, talent here in our backyard, and it's pretty cool that you also still call Cobb County and Marietta your home. I think that's pretty awesome with everybody moving to Nashville these days. But when it comes to growing up, I mean, I'm sure you get asked this every single interview, and people are going to keep asking it. But what was it like growing up in such a big musical family, especially during that time?
To be honest, like the typical response I give, and this one is it's true to heart. Whenever you're a kid, whatever you grow up around is pretty much normal for you, and it doesn't matter if your dad's, or your parents are in some kind of trade, or if they're in a corporate job or anything like that. So just the influence of music for me, it just seemed like a normal kind of thing. I didn't realize until I was probably like 5 or 6 that there was something kind of different about my father's occupation or just my family life. But yeah, music was always just something that was present, and I just assumed that for most people that was just like a staple in their life. So I never really thought any different of it until I got a little older.
A little older, you realize that most people did not grow up with tons of music and creativity and music writing around and producing around. Yeah, I've heard that before. That's interesting.
Yeah, not a lot of my friends had dads with hair down to their shoulders or anything, so it was kind of stuck out like a sore thumb for a little while.
And so when did you start getting into playing music yourself, or what attracted you to it?
This is such an odd response, but to be honest with you, I think Guitar Hero, the video game, changed my whole entire course of life, just because of the soundtrack that it exposed such a young audience to. Being a kid, you always listen to your parents' music. And for my dad, what he exposed me to was a lot of like the Eagles, Boston, Fleetwood Mac, greats like that, but it was never anything super heavy. And I remember playing one of the Guitar Hero games when I was just a kid and I heard the song War Pigs for the first time. And I immediately thought to myself, what the hell is this? I don't know what this is, but I want to be a part of this. And from then on out, that kind of heavy metal 70s all the way up to 80s 90s, alternative rock, heavy metal, whatever you want to call it, it really grabbed my attention and just kind of guided me down my own path of finding the influences that to this day really reflected my songwriting and performance in every aspect of my career.
It's funny you say that because I definitely grew up with Guitar Hero as well, and but me and my buddies got into the hard rock and heavy metal like back in high school when nobody else thought it was cool. We had the CDs and did our digital copying of CDs and filled up notebooks full of ugly looking copied CDs of hard rock and heavy metal. And then of course Guitar Hero coming along, it just everything blew up. We had a lot of people listening to it at that point because of the Guitar Hero influence, where people were listening to those hard rock and heavy metal songs that never would have listened to them before.
Yeah, I mean, it completely changed the landscape of what was cool again, and really exposed an audience that really would never had any clue who, Foghat or any of these kind of more obscure one-hit wonder type bands, Survivor, Dragon Force, all these crazy bands, and it just brought a new form of, I think, pop culture and making guitar playing cool again, which I think for a little while kind of went out the window. And then all of a sudden there was like this renaissance in the mid 2000s where it became cool again. And that's really when it grabbed my attention. And from then on out, it's been a wild ride of just kind of chasing that same feeling that I got from being exposed to the Black Sabbaths and Motorheads when it first happened.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think I heard in another interview that you didn't originally start out singing. Like I think you were more on the engineering side or went to school for it.
I did. In 2019, I went to a place called the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences out in Gilbert, Arizona. And it was like a 9-month trading school thing. And I figured out very quickly that I was a terrible engineer. There's a very specific and patient type of mindset you have to have going into that. And I just didn't have that, to be honest with you. But God bless those that can, because they really taught me the importance of focusing on the details. um, so I always equate going out there to just being able to communicate with engineers slightly better. Like I said, terrible engineer, but I'm able to speak the jargon just a little bit better and convey something if I have something in my head to, get onto the soundboard or do through Pro Tools. It comes out a little bit more smooth than normal, but going out there, it really kind of showed me what it was I was good at and what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And I think that was a major part of finding my path was figuring out, more importantly, what I didn't want to do, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then so when did you just start, getting on the mic and singing like that?
To be honest with you, as soon as 2020 happened, obviously like the world shut down, and being based out of the South, the regulations weren't as strict, so there were still a couple of dive bars open up, and there really wasn't anything to do. Touring had completely stopped on all like professional fronts. So I thought, no better time than the present to get over stage fright, which I had which is crazy to admit, but it was a really bad stage fright. I couldn't play guitar and sing in front of people at all. I had this horrible tremor that would go through my hands, and I just had a hard time with it. So for the first couple of months of 2020, I would just go out every single night and do 2 or 3 songs at a open bar or an open mic night at some bar, and play continuously until eventually that kind of fear was gone. And had a buddy of mine that I contacted who was a great lead guitar player and said, hey, you want to do like duo shows together? And I was my own booking agent. I was my own everything. And I just started calling up people as much as I possibly could, getting opportunities. And if I called, 300 people, maybe 2 would get back to you. But had my first gig in July of 2020 that was a paid gig, and did like 3 hours off of, I'm not even joking, 18 songs. I don't know how we pulled that off, but just a lot of jamming, I guess. But yeah, that's basically how it started. It was just all in 2020. So I'm still really green in this and just figuring things out along the way. But it's been a learning process that you don't you can read all the books and listen to all the podcasts you want, but getting out there and actually getting your hands dirty, that it's been the greatest learning process I've ever had.
And so tell me about the brand new single you have out, Nervous System Overload. I want to hear more about that song because I liked it, man. It had a more of a hard rock feel, had even a little bit of a scream in there at times, and pretty dark and musically, a little bit moody lyrically as well.
Yeah, that was we recorded that in June of last year, and the way it came about was I was put in contact with two, like a writer and a producer based out of Nashville, Kelly Page and Steven Wilson, and they both are phenomenally talented people. But it was basically pitched to me that these two writers were more of pop artists, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Fast forward, go to Nashville, end up hanging out with these people, and within 5-10 minutes, we're like hanging out and having a great time. And they got me on a creative level, and I was like, I'm trying to get out of this whole southern rock vibe that I thought I wanted originally, but just found out it's not for me. I wanted to do more along the lines of the influences I grew up listening to, like I said, like the Sabbaths and Motorheads and Stone Temple Pilots and all those guys. So they immediately caught on to it, and we were able to start writing. And the subject matter behind it was all about I guess the overprescription of psychiatric medications nowadays, like SSRIs, Adderall, all that stuff, and then the amount of people dealing with anxiety and having this nervous system overload. And I think Kelly was the one that said something along those lines. I was like, that's the premise of the song. Let's break this down. And as we're doing it, Steven Wilson's building the track and just came up with this completely badass composition that you hear today. And I couldn't be more proud of it. And working with people like that really push you forward and get you excited about being uncomfortable and getting out of your comfort zone, that's huge for me. And that's the end product of what nervous system overload is.
Yeah, man, I like the song. Like you mentioned, it's got a little bit of alternative feel to it, a little bit of that, STP. But you also definitely have some modern hard rock elements and everything in there, which I enjoy as well. And like you said, it's a departure from the other song that I heard of yours, Right on Time, which is, of course, more southern and kind of classic rock sounding, and a little bit more positive and upbeat. Well, a lot more positive and upbeat. Let me just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun to kind of go on both sides of the spectrum and do something a little light and more classically based. And the guitar tones are a lot more clean and it's a lot more of an analog sound, whereas nervous system overload is a lot more of the new age not synthetic, but heavily based in synthesizers and a whole bunch of crazy plugins that are available nowadays. So I really wanted to have a lot more fun with kind of the things that are available in the modern age for creating music and just get experimental with it. So yeah, it's definitely its own beast, but I love both the songs all the same.
And then I think the other song of yours that I heard was Oblivion. Did that come out in between those?
No, Oblivion actually came out first. I released that in
Really?
March. Yes, sir. So I released that in March of 2022, and then a couple months later did Right on Time. So Nervous System has been the longest hiatus since my last release. So it's been almost a year to the day since Right on Time came out.
Interesting. Because Oblivion does have that more darker and moodier feel to it. It does have a classic rock kind of vibe to it, but it's a little bit more akin to Nervous System Overload, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's Oblivion was completely written by me, and I take a lot of pride in that song just because it was a lot to trying to figure out my sound. And I think that darker kind of vibe has always been my bread and butter and where I thrive in writing that kind of subject matter and those minor chords. I'm kind of addicted to them. But Right on Time, I was able to write that with a guy named Leroy Powell, who's a phenomenal guitar player, has played with all the guys from like Shooter Jennings and done a lot of the Stapleton records and stuff. So he's one of the top guitarists in all of Nashville. And he was able to bring me down that road and kind of guide me through more of that southern rock vibe. But that darker tone, that's all me. That's my favorite.
And you never tried to write country music, did you?
Never, never. I never really as odd as it sounds to say, I never really got bit by the bug. My sister is a huge, Liam Rhymes, Martina McBride, Reba McEntire fan, and I respect all the greats, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, the list goes on. But I never got that same kind of feeling from country music as I did from rock and roll. It never got me in the same way. I never related to it as much as some of the people in my family. So no, I never wrote anything country, but like I said, I respect it, and there's some great songwriters out there to this day that are just killing it in the country music game.
So you told me a little bit about what you traditionally like to listen to, some of those old school, Black Sabbath and Stone Temple Pilots and Ozzy and some of those other bands. But what are you hooked on lately? Anything more modern? What have you been listening to lately?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a ton of artists that I've been listening to recently that are about my age, if not younger. One of them is his name is Youngblood. He's a British artist, and he's got a fantastic sound, man. He's been killing it for the last couple of years. But Youngblood, the Kid Leroy, some of the bands I've been listening to have been more along the lines that I know they can be a little polarizing, but like I love Greta Van Fleet. I love the fact that they're exposing new audiences to like that traditional 70s analog sound, whether or not people, want to call them Zeppelin or not. It's neither here nor there for me, but anything like that that just really makes me zone into the music and not just kind of see that they're placating towards whatever's popular right now. I'll dig in it. It doesn't necessarily just have to be rock. It can be hip hop artists or country artists or Americana. Like I just want something that's a little bit more um, true to heart, and I feel like I can sniff that out pretty well.
So growing up with a famous dad in the music industry, do you have any funny stories interacting with big musicians as a child?
Yeah, one that comes into mind when I was about 4 years old, we went to go see Ray Charles. I think it was when my father was doing the CMT Crossroads with Ray Charles, and I had no idea the guy was blind, and I I had no idea. And I remember just being like a little, 3, 4 year old toddler running around, and I was like trying, typical toddler, you're trying to get everyone's attention. And he's sitting there, typical Ray Charles fashion, just smiling around, and I'm waving my hands around trying to get his attention. Look at me, look at me. And little did I know he couldn't.
That's hilarious. That's a good story. So these next questions are what we close with and ask everyone. So first question, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
I'd basically just tell myself, you got to get out there. No matter how much you try and educate yourself vicariously, whether it be through books or, like I said, podcasts or YouTube videos, there's just something to be said about truly getting out there in the field and learning from trial and error, and just keeping a focused mindset that everything's not going to come instantaneously, and all good things are based off of hard work and dedication. So just having that kind of patience and not stressing out so much because one particular thing didn't pan out the way you thought. Life's not a movie necessarily, so you have to be very understanding that this is a process more than anything, and you just kind of have to trust the process. So I would tell my younger self, like, you know don't stress out as much because everything's going to be okay.
Good answer. Next question. What are you drinking lately? If you don't drink alcohol, it can be anything refreshing you like to drink.
So I'm 23 years old, so I feel kind of weird admitting this, but recently I've just been drinking a lot of apothic wine, which is like it's like a red wine, but it's so damn good. Between that and Michelob,
Oh yeah, I know that wine.
yeah, between me and my girlfriend. That's our absolute favorite. So yeah, I'll say apothic like Cabernet or something like that, and a Michelob Ultra if I'm feeling like nursing on something throughout the day.
So as you know, this is Rock Down South. So what is something, or maybe a couple things that come to mind, that you love about the South?
The hospitality, you can't beat it. I lived in Arizona and I lived in Orange County, California, and just the appreciation I have for just the simple kind gestures that people do in the South is just it's you can't beat it. Um just the ability to look someone in the eye and talk to them, shake their hand, and know that for the most part, they're being a genuine human being and they're not just it's a lot more of a slowed down pace down south, but I respect and appreciate it so much more from being away from it and coming back to it now. So yeah, just that genuine southern hospitality, you cannot beat it.
Hey, thank you so much, Tristan, for being a part of the show today. Where can people find and connect with you online?
So if anyone ever wants to find me, my biggest social media is Instagram, Tristan Tritt, or you can go to Tristan Tritt 13 on TikTok, Tristan Tritt on Facebook. Basically, just Tristan Tritt anything, I'll pop up. And then if you want to ever find out tour dates or anything like that or merchandise, just go to tristantritt.com, and that's pretty much all the info.
Thank you so much for listening to the show today. We hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I had a really great time chatting with Tristan. He's a really unique talent and an all-around good dude. I can't wait to hear more music from him here in the future and hopefully catch a show sometime soon. So make sure to go follow Tristan Tritt on all of his social media pages and check out his latest single called Nervous System Overload wherever you listen to music. You can find all our content at rockdownsouth.com and make sure to go follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for the latest updates. Leave us a 5-star review if you can. We would really appreciate it. And as always, the views and opinions expressed by our guests are theirs and don't necessarily reflect our own. I'm Mark, and you've been listening to Rock Down South. See y'all next time.